a mother who, you know, whose child could do no wrong. I have a family member, and that sort of happened there. The mother excused the child.
Well, that's probably fairly common.
Fairly common. Have you researched other people that mothers can look the other way?
Well, it happens a great deal. I mean, I think sadly it is very common that, you know, parents will look the other way if their children are involved in something wrong rather than trying to make at least some feeble attempt to speak out against it. But I do not think, as some have implied, that this was an incestuous relationship or anything abnormal. What was abnormal was she loved her son too much, and that's, you know, a very common thing in the world. But for some reason, her normal moral compass just finally began to spin off its needle. Something made it spin out of control. She was a normal person who just finally went off the psychological and moral rails. Whereas Stewart may have, from his earliest days, had something wrong with him. We'll never know. Sir?
Could you tell us a story surrounding the mother's visit to him in the hospital?
Christine Collins?
Right.
Oh, yes. When Stewart took the people on a trip to the desert, and the law enforcement authorities on a trip to the desert said he'd show where he buried their bodies. And it lasted over a day, and he'd say, I think it's over here. No, wait, it's over there. No, I lied. We've got to go a totally different place. I think this is it. No, wait a minute, I'm tired, I want to go home. But I didn't lie, he'd said when he'd get home. We were within 50 feet of where I buried the bodies. And because they were out in the desert air for so long, he caught bronchitis, and he was in the LA County Jail's hospital. He hadn't been taken back to Riverside yet. And Christine went to visit him, and she just asked him directly, did you kill my son? And he was acting like a puppy dog, saying, Mrs. Collins, please believe me, I had nothing to do with harming your boy. And she believed him. Well, she wanted to believe him. And, but sadly, the day before his execution, he called both Mrs. Collins and Mrs. Winslow to San Quentin. And he said, I'll tell you exactly what I did with your boys' bodies. I'll give you some peace. But then he said, wait a minute, I didn't kill any boys. And then he said, well, no, ask my mom or ask Sanford. They know who killed them. They're responsible, not me. It was just his final sadistic game. It wasn't altruistic at all. He was getting his kicks, playing one last sadistic game on his victims' mothers. Sir?
Was there a full trial transcript available to you when you?
Yes, sir. Over 3,000 pages. I got it from the California State Archives. Well, others, Steve Leck and Mr. Tony Mostrom, a writer and artist who's also interested in the case, who's here today, have also seen the transcript. And oh, this is my cue. Thank you, sir. I have my big moment. I have a huge box of about 4,000 pages of primary source materials, the trial transcript, all 5 volumes, and lots of other documents from archives and libraries all around, and hundreds of newspaper articles and photos. When I get back to North Carolina this week, if it's all right with the library and the Archives Society, I'd like to box them up and FedEx them, donate them to your library and to your archives here, because they really belong to Riverside County.
Okay, can I give a little plug here?
Sure.
The movie Changeling is supposed to come out on the 31st, and the reason I know is because I've been following it. My husband is the president of Riverside Model A Club, and the Model A, and he's also a member of the Corona Riverside Model T Club. Those clubs were called by the groups putting on the film, representatives of Clint Eastwood. They were called to bring their cars for the filming, and a lot of the local people were also extras in the film because they had to drive, and they were very particular about I mean, even if you were only driving the car, my husband couldn't be an extra because he refused to have his beard shaved.
Oh, dear.
But even if they were driving, they had to give him a 1920s haircut. And I mean, that's to go like that through the film. But it was very interesting, and so if you want to see the film, it's out on the 31st.
Yes, I know, I can't wait to see it.
One more question for you. Okay, I'm born and bred Southern California. Grew up in Lakewood, Artesia, Dairy Valley, Dairyland. Moved to Corona in the 80s. I never heard of this, and I had never heard of this crime. And I kind of, you know, I've heard of all kinds of serial killers, and this is the first time within, gosh, I think a month ago. It's the first time I've ever heard of this. So I was wondering if anybody has the same, you know, never heard of the Wineville.
Steve?
All I can tell you is that I was getting inquiries about 4 or 5 years ago for it, and it would appear in newspaper articles periodically. The Daily Bulletin has done stuff, the press has done stuff on it, but it's always been fairly superficial. And just a very general, you know, references to them and
Never
what
heard of
happened.
it, yeah. Never heard of it, and I was like, wow.
Well, as you know, my great-grandfather was deputy sheriff.
Been to Crevecoeur.
Yeah, and he was involved in going up to the chicken ranch and getting some of the evidence. And so I've got photos in his scrapbook, and about every 2 years I'll get a call around Halloween from various newspaper people wanting to know if they can use the pictures. And I think the Riverside Press is going to be doing it again.
Yes,
soon.
they have an article coming out, I think, this Friday.
Yeah, some of those pictures are from his scrapbook.
Well, that's wonderful.
Did they ever come up with a reason why because I know why they changed it from Wineville, why they called it Miraloma? From the Wineville. You know, because I know why they changed it, why they came
Well,
up with the Miraloma name.
it means view of the hills or look at the hills, perhaps just because you have such a nice view of the hills there and it's very striking, I don't know.
Yeah, good, just.
See, do you know?
I wouldn't, Kim, do you
You
know?
know, Mariloma, the area of Mariloma has had many names over the years, and, I don't really know, it means view of the hills. And, an early name of Mariloma was, Pleasant Valley and different things like that, and it might have just kind of been a full circle kind of thing coming back to.
What's the difference between Miraloma and Pedley?
That's a story for another day, but there's no, Headley is a different community from there.
I have a book called Riverside County Place Names, and I looked up Miraloma and Eastville to see if that was historical. And all it says is the name was changed from Wineville because of, and that it's this, generic Hillview view of the hill, and that's all it says in this book.
Yeah, I do research on Peruvian history, and I've been unable to discover any story about why they picked Mariloma. There's a story about why Glenavon is called Glenavon. I know why Pedley is called Pedley, but other than the fact that they changed the name because of the murders from Wineville to Mariloma.
All I can say is, well, you certainly do have a nice view of the hills in what was once Wineville. Perhaps that's it. You just can see the hills from there, and it's a pretty view.
Yeah.
Do you know how long it was from the time the Collins boy disappeared to the time that the ringer showed up, since apparently there was a recognition problem?
Well, he was kidnapped in about March the 10th, 1928. And I believe it was July or August when Arthur Hutchins, the changeling, showed up. And as I said, Christine and the cops both sort of doubted that this was the right boy, but whether through